spinning, it's spinning. It's spinning like extra long today. Okay. Hi, friends. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley Ariana. Today I'm joined by Rohan. Thank goodness we were able to make it work. Rohan is visiting me from a dungeon, as you can tell. I'm just kidding. It's from a hotel room. Hi, Rohan. How are you doing this Friday? Where are you at? Tell the people.
Doing good. I'm in Indianapolis for the Big Ten Championship tomorrow night, and so in a hotel room, like Ashley said, doing good. But the important part is the Niners. They're going to play Philly at the Link on Sunday. Going to be a big game. So excited to see that. Excited to talk about it today.
Do you know what's interesting? Like everyone talks about how kind of dangerous or feisty of an atmosphere it is. I kind of feel like it would be. I'm kind of jealous of people who could go. Doesn't it seem like it's like a playoff atmosphere? I was talking to Eric Crocker, and apparently the tickets are super expensive. But I feel like just even if the 49ers players and the Eagles players are downplaying it, which I think it means a lot to them, but just like outwardly they might be downplaying it a little bit. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like just a fan atmosphere of being in the link with the weather supposed to be kind of, maybe raining in the morning, cooling off, and then I just feel like every big play, 49er fans are going to be holding their breath, and the Eagles are going to be cheering, and then the Eagles are going to be booing. I just feel like it'll be such a fun atmosphere. I'm jealous of anyone who gets to go and experience
No,
that.
I'm sure. Even if you're watching it, from the media room, whatever, that atmosphere in the link, that's one that I think you definitely have to go to understand how nice it is. Because, well, I don't know if it's going to be nice if you're a 49ers fan and going, but it's definitely a lively atmosphere.
Yeah, I've heard some people say like you should wear all black and stuff. I remember last year. I wonder if Fred Warner will come out. Everyone's asking about Brock Purdy and his elbow and kind of revenge for that game. But Fred Warner's wife, she kind of went viral on like TikTok last year because after the game, I guess some fans were like throwing trash at her and stuff. So I wonder if he'll go in there with like a little extra spite. No beat writers are asking about that. See, I get the juicy details because I secretly want to be Gen Z, so I'm on TikTok of every second of the day. And so I saw that. And so I would be asking Fred Warner the tough questions. Are you going to
Yeah,
hit someone extra hard to defend your wife?
I've seen it. I think she said she won't go, right? Because it
No,
was
well, now she's
too
pregnant.
ugly of an
Now she's
environment.
pregnant.
Oh, okay,
I know too
okay.
much about these people. They have a podcast where they talk about reality shows, and I'm like, you're kind of a reality show for me. I keep up with your life. But moving away from
Keeping
Fred
up with the
Warner's life
Warners.
and maybe on to the players in the game a little bit, I wanted to ask you, do you think that the 49ers players and coaches respect Jalen Hurts? And the reason that I'm asking this is because a beat reporter asked Steve Wilkes earlier this week, or no, maybe it was today. Um, he asked him what things about Jalen Hurts stood out to him, and they really focused on Jalen Hurts' running ability and kind of the way to beat him being make him play quarterback, keep him in the pocket. Yesterday, Nick Bosa had a similar answer, kind of talking about containing him being most important, and talking about the way to potentially like limit his talent and big play ability would be to keep him in the pocket and make him go through his reads and or go through his progressions and decide where to throw the ball in that way instead of letting him kind of run around. So, how do you feel about Jalen Hurts and how do you think the 49ers feel about him? They played
I
him
think
twice.
yeah, I think he's a talented quarterback. I do think that I'm not going to say he's taken a step back. I don't think that's true. I do think that it's intriguing how the discourse this year has been about Jalen Hurts because the fact of the matter is Jalen Hurts this year has turned the ball over a good amount. I mean, he's been successful because he's been able to run the football while also improve as a passer over the last 2 years. That you can't deny. Jalen Hurts has become, when we played him back in 2021, Jalen Hurts was not as good of a as good of a passer. He was a guy who looked to target downfield, but he was not that accurate in that realm. I believe he went 12 of 23 in the game where we won. It was an ugly game where we won 20-11 in week 2 of 2021. He's much improved from that aspect. But if you look at how Jalen Hurts has played this year, there are some ups and downs. Hurts has 10 interceptions on the year, has a couple more, I believe, 4 more fumbles, and so he's among the league leaders in turnovers this year, which is something to monitor on top of what he's done.
Completely. Now, do you think that the Eagles respect Eagles and their coaching staff respect Brock Purdy when game planning? Like when the defensive coordinator is game planning, normally in the beginning of the year, you heard opposing teams talk about limiting Christian McCaffrey and kind of that being the most important aspect of slowing down the 49ers offense. Do you think that that applies to this game? How do you think that uh, the players across from Brock Purdy are going to feel about him?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I wrote about earlier this week, something I saw was defensive coordinator Sean Desai, the new defensive coordinator for the Eagles, said something about Brock Purdy. He said how they respect him, how he's a guy who can go through his progressions. He's a guy who can be that type of quarterback, and that's what makes that system kind of run. Is when you have a quarterback that's able to execute at the level Brock Purdy does. Now, the way that Sean Desai said the Eagles are going to counter him is he's evasive, he's slippery, but if we can corral that element of Brock Purdy, the playmaking ability, the extension of plays ability, he believes that'll hinder Brock Purdy's ability overall. The way to do that, collapse the pocket. And the Eagles, they have good defensive players. You know, Hassan Reddick is there. You've got some nice defensive tackles. Jalen Carter is having a good rookie year, potentially in the front running for rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. That is. You've got a couple of good players on that defensive front. Josh Sweat's another guy on the other edge, and so I think that when you talk about Philadelphia, that's going to be their goal. Keep Purdy in the pocket. Don't let him extend plays. And then the other thing that they're going to do on top of that, it's really a mixture of two things that kind of blend well with each other. You collapse the pocket, make sure Brock Purdy isn't able to extend plays, and then at the line of scrimmage, you play tighter coverage, something Sean Desai talked about with James Bradbury, with Darius Slay, the way that you play tighter coverage, that way on these quicker balls, or not quicker balls, but like these throws that require good timing, that come out of Brock Purdy's hands quicker, they're able to contest it a little more, making the margin for error a little slightly smaller for Brock Purdy. I think that's the way that they're going to, defend him. So to answer your question, I do believe they can respect him, but I also believe that I also think they believe their defense is going to be able to stop Brock Purdy.
Okay, I like that. I find that interesting that they or that their coordinator kind of highlighted limiting his scramble ability, because that's something that we've noticed way more this year than last year, and especially as the games have gone on, as such an or like a highlight of Brock Purdy's kind of ability is when he's kind of making up for that offensive line the offensive line when they're struggling, he's usually able to extend plays. But against a team that's kind of limiting that, that kind of goes weakness for weakness with the 49ers. Now, do you think that Kyle Shanahan will be able to scheme against that with having those shorter, intermediate, quick timing throws to guys like maybe Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey? Or do you think that they're going to be more run game focused, the 49ers, that is?
I think the 49ers are going to try and execute the plan that they set out to kind of face last year. Obviously, didn't get the chance to do so with the way that game went. I think the way San Francisco is going to look to win this game is by targeting the linebackers. Philadelphia, they lost both of their starters last year. I thought T.J. Edwards had a good year. Kaiser White was all right, but they lost both their starters. It's Zach Cunningham, Nicholas Morrow. I believe Kobe Dean's on IR, so he won't play in this one. So you got some average esque linebackers that I think Kyle Shanahan's going to look to exploit. It's finding favorable matchups, placing running backs or placing tight ends against those linebackers in order to create, favorable matchups. And I think that that's the way that the 49ers are going to look to execute. It might be a shorter game plan, but in that regard, you're going to be able to have better matchups against the specific group. Something that we just saw this past week against Seattle. The 49ers look to target guys like Bobby Wagner in coverage, Jordan Brooks in coverage, guys who are solid linebackers, but not necessarily really that good in coverage. I think that that's what they're going to do again. And I like the comment that Ellis just pointed out. Yeah, he said, I read the Eagles struggle against tight ends. Well, that's because of the favorable matchups that they're able to create. Kevin Byard should help with that a little bit. Kevin Byard, obviously, a safety for the Eagles. Reed Blankenship has had a bad year. They put Sidney Brown in the slot, a slot amount. So you've got, a lot of different options, but I do think that the 49ers are going to find ways to move the ball in this one, especially when you consider the last few games, how opposing offenses have been able to move the ball against Philadelphia. Talking about the last three games, which are playoff caliber teams, Philadelphia is the fourth worst defense in terms of total yards allowed. They allow about 340 yards per game in the last three games. And they faced Buffalo, they faced Dallas, and they faced Kansas City. So they've given up a good amount of yards. That hasn't been the issue. And the other part about this formula for the 49ers, I know I'm veering a little bit off topic, but the other part
Mhm.
about this for the 49ers is, well, the 49ers, if you're able to give them a lot of yards, they're going to be able to execute because they get to the red zone at a high rate. Not only that, they're able to score at the red zone at a high rate. Need to improve a little bit in the way that they attack the red zone. Has been a little less efficient in the second half of the season, but they get to the red zone and they score in the red zone. That's not usually a formula for success for opposing defenses. Philadelphia is going to need to clear some things up defensively, and I don't know if this is the perfect matchup to do so.
I agree. And while we're talking about the tight ends versus linebackers for Philadelphia, I thought it would be maybe good to go over injury updates from today. So Lane Johnson, who is obviously crucial to their offensive line, is expected to play. Dallas Goddard, I hope I'm saying that correctly, practiced today and does expect to play as well. So he'll be important for their red zone while we're talking about tight ends. Jalen Hurts loves to connect with him, especially on third down. Um, but when it comes to linebackers, Zach Cunningham is supposed to be out for them, and supposedly
Yeah,
his backup is pretty weak. So hopefully they'll have George Kittle kind of exploiting that area. Now, I have seen that Philadelphia is pretty good at preventing yards after catch. Like they give up a lot of passes, but they're able to stop them. But maybe that will be an area of weakness now, putting George Kittle on Cunningham's backup. Do you think that that'll be something that they look to exploit in this game?
yeah, that's a good point. I talked about Zach Cunningham just a minute ago, but you are right. I believe he was ruled out earlier today, which
Yeah.
means Nicholas Morrow is going to earn the start and Christian Ellis is going to earn the start because Nakobe Dean is still on IR. Those are guys that, like I said, they tried to target the linebackers last year, and the linebackers were better. Now, with this linebacker group, they're going to target them. I know there's been rumors about Shaq Leonard, Darius Leonard, or now known as Shaquille Leonard, potentially joining
From the
them.
Colts, right?
That obviously won't happen though this week. And so you got two guys, Christian Ellis, the guy who's going to replace Zach Cunningham in the starting lineup. He was initially kind of a guy who played a guy in the rotation. He got actually benched. He's been on special teams duty for primarily the past few weeks until obviously this past weekend when Cunningham got injured. Christian Ellis got on the field, and guess what? Buffalo kind of went after him. They targeted him. Would expect San Francisco to try and go after a similar game plan.
I agree. And then while we're talking about injuries, it's probably important also to talk about the 49ers. Eric Armstead did play today or did practice today and is expected to play, which is good because he was struggling with a foot injury and that kind of worried me. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan was kind of coy about it. Yes, not today, but yesterday when he was talking about it. But today he was a little bit more clear that Eric Armstead would be okay. I thought maybe it was that plantar fasciitis because I know that those things can kind of come back and linger, especially he's a bigger guy that puts a lot of weight on his lower body. but sounds like he'll be okay. I don't know if he'll be playing. He's probably playing through some pain, but it sounds like it won't make it any worse and he's good to go. Obviously, this is a really important game, so we don't know potentially if it wasn't such an important game if he'd push through, but seems okay enough to go at least, which is a really good sign because the Eagles have a really incredible offensive line, especially interior offensive line. So they're going to need 49ers are going to need all the help they can on their defensive line front, especially to help that secondary.
I think that what you bring up is a good point. You talk about Arik Armstead, pointed out his last year's plantar fasciitis. Good sign is it doesn't look like this is going to be similar to that last year injury. I think that this is something that, he's dealing with. Shanahan got that comment earlier. He said, I don't know. But the fact that he's playing this week and the fact that he, practiced today, that's a good sign. You hope he plays. I'm assuming he's going to play. The 49ers, luckily, this week seems like they're getting closer, back to full health. Nick Bosa had a toe injury. He practiced in limited fashion today. He's not on the injury report, which is a good sign. Armstead is questionable. You usually expect him to play. And then the other two guys who are questionable are backups, Jordan Mason, Ray McLeod. So it seems like the injury side seems to favor the 49ers in this one because when you talk about Philly, as you did the other day, or I mean, not other day, the other minute, Zach Cunningham, he's out. The other guy who was really facing an injury was Lane Johnson, the groin injury, but he practiced in full Thursday, Friday, so that'll be an intriguing matchup. He should start. Jordan Davis, he was limited earlier in the week. He's going to play. And so it seems like, this will be a solid game. Both sides seem fairly healthy. I think the one main true question for Philly is Fletcher Cox because he hasn't practiced all week, but he was listed as questionable. And he's one of those veterans, that the Eagles trust to where, if they want to just put him in the game without a week of practice, they're going to be able to do so.
Much like Trent Williams, right? Or even Deebo Samuel when he was out. I'm not really worried about Jordan Mason because I'm kind of unsure if Jordan Mason would have gone anyways. Ray McLeod, that is kind of concerning just because he's been our return guy. But who's Ray Ray's backup if he can't go for that? Do you know? That could be
Are you talking
interesting.
about returners? I would assume it would be
Yeah.
Ronnie Bell. Ronnie Bell, I would think so.
Ooh, okay. I feel like I'd be interested. I'd be interested in that because didn't Ray Ray also fumbled last game, right? Obviously, you don't want to hold like one bad play against him. But I do like that they both teams seem fairly healthy. I'm not one of those fans that wants there to be a huge advantage on one team versus the other. I'm so excited to see teams go against each other and I find them both so talented and I think this could be a start of a really exciting rivalry between the two teams if they continue to kind of have the success that they're having. The Cowboys did look really good yesterday, but I assume that this might be a preview of the NFC Championship game coming up in the playoffs. So I don't know. I kind of would love to see both teams at their full health and in good weather going against each other because I want to see how both teams do with all the conditions being kind of the same. But there is a chance that it'll rain. For right now, it says that it looks like it's going to rain in the morning, but cool off by game time. Obviously, that's a couple days away. Those things are subject to kind of change a little bit. We've seen the Eagles be able to play really well in the rain as early as the last game against the Bills. We saw them have no problem in the rain. And unfortunately with the 49ers, we've seen them really struggle in the game. My immediate thought goes to that Colts game, then the monsoon against the Chicago Bears. But then when we're talking about Purdy, we had that playoff game. There was a quarter against Seattle where it rained and he really struggled. And it was the Browns game this year, right? That you kind of saw kind of his worst play in my opinion so far, where the ball kind of fell out of his hand, which is interesting because he doesn't have, even though he is a smaller guy, I think I heard someone say he has bigger hands than Trey Lance did. So it's not like he has like tiny hands or something. And he also played in college where there was weather, but you've really seen him kind of struggle in the rain games. Kyle Shanahan has been asked before if he likes to prepare using a wet football. He kind of scoffs at that question. I remember a year or two ago when he was originally asked about it, he said he thinks that it can get in the players' heads if they have to practice with a wet ball, and that he feels like they're overthinking it. Now, this year he didn't say that, but he just said that no, they wouldn't be doing that. Now, Brock Purdy, however, did say that he was going to test it out before the game when he was asked about it today. And he said that he would be open to using a glove if he needed to, and open to kind of dunking the football in water and practicing with a wide receiver after practice on his own. So it does seem like he's able to, or he's going to, step up and take the initiative if that feels like something he needs to practice for. Are you worried about the rain? If there is rain?
Um, I do think that it's important. I think that it's something that could affect how the game goes because we've seen rain games in the past affect quarterback play specifically, not only with the 49ers, but in general. And if you talk about the way the rain game goes, I do think that it'll favor Philadelphia because Philadelphia has one of the best running attacks in the NFL. That RPO system has been very effective, and the number one thing Philadelphia is able to do when they get those a good run game going is have third and short. In short distance situations, just in general, that obviously favors them with the way that they operate, the way that they're able to win up front. And I think when it comes to rain games, there are a few factors that matter. The run game is one because obviously that's the way that teams usually like to move the football, and trench play is the other. And so I think the advantage goes to Philadelphia because I think right now, if you think about it, they probably have the advantage in both. They even even if Christian McCaffrey, right? Christian McCaffrey is undoubtedly one of the best team running backs, if not the best in the NFL. But even without him, I mean, even with him, Philadelphia has a strong running game. I mean, they're able to move the ball well. I think their efficiency this year has been down, but I also think that's in portion due to the amount that Jalen Hurts runs and the short distance situation that Hurts runs for. He only averages 3.6 yards per carry. And if you look at the remainder of the bunch, talking about guys like DeAndre Swift, talking about, they've got a couple of couple of names there that have kind of as seen playing time this year. But a guy like DeAndre Swift, who's been their main running back, he averages 4.8 yards per carry. And so when you look at the efficiency, they've been efficient. They've run the football at a high rate. And they score a good amount of touchdowns as well with Hurts on the ground. He has 18 passing touchdowns and 11 rushing touchdowns this year. And then the other portion that I talked about, trench play, well, the Eagles have a strong offensive line. I mean, and with Lane Johnson back, it's going to be fully healthy. You've got Kelsey there, you've got Johnson there, you've got Jordan Mailata on one side, Landon Dickerson on the other side. Even with the loss of Isaac Seumalo, I think they've slotted in Cam Jurgens into that not left, right guard spot, and so he's gotten a couple of he's gotten some play as well, and so I do think that overall they've got a good team. You can argue which defensive line is better, but I do think when you look matchup wise, the Eagles have a better matchup because the 49ers offensive line isn't as strong, whereas the remainder of the trench play, 49ers D line, Eagles O line, Eagles D line are all pretty good.
I love that. I was going to say it's kind of it's going to be a strength on a strength with the 49ers defensive line against that O-line, but there is going to be some mismatches. I was going to we'll start here. Who do you have more confidence in? We're going to start with the quarterbacks. Who do you have more confidence in, Brock Purdy or Jalen Hurts? If you were going to start a team maybe from scratch, or if you just want to talk about in this game, when it comes to protecting the football, when it comes to scoring touchdowns, you kind of talked about Christian McCaffrey. I think you can double check me on this, but Jalen Hurts and Christian McCaffrey are tied for 11 rushing touchdowns this year, right? Kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Both the
yeah.
same amount. That's such an asset that the Eagles have with Jalen Hurts. That's so crazy that they're getting
I know,
that from
I
a
know. That's the way that they're able to operate, and it's efficient.
yeah. And that's why like a lot of time like sometimes you're kind of like, why is he in the MVP conversation? He's really not protecting the football and stuff like that. But with him bringing that like total complete aspect, like he's basically two players in one. Like he gets to be their quarterback and their star running back. Like he's doing the work that Purdy is doing if Purdy was Purdy and McCaffrey in one guy, kind of. That might
Yeah,
be over. quantifying it, but it's
But you're
pretty.
talking about confidence. I think this is a tough question. And I'm not saying it's tough because I do believe there is one quarterback who is definitively better than the other. I think at this stage right now, I think there is one quarterback who has proven a little more and who's been definitively a little better in their career. However, if you talk about confidence, like I mentioned at the beginning of the year, sorry, beginning of this episode. I keep saying random times. Beginning of this episode, though, Jalen Hurts has 14 turnovers this season. That's double of what Brock Purdy has. I believe even more than double, or no, directly double because Purdy has 2 fumbles, 5 interceptions. That's double of
Yeah.
what Brock Purdy has. So that's been an issue this year, and that's why I think you can create an argument for Brock Purdy being higher than Jalen Hurts if you talk about the MVP race. I think that there's an argument to be made. I don't know if I would go strongly into that argument. I think it could be a flip of the coin, but a lot of people believe Jalen Hurts is the front runner for MVP. I don't even know if he's the front runner in his own division for MVP. I would put my vote for Dak Prescott over Jalen Hurts if I had given the choice. I've been pretty high on the Dak Prescott MVP race this year. I don't know if he's the front runner overall, but I believe that he's been very underrated this year. And so if I'm talking more confidence, I think I still have to go
Especially after
Hurts,
that last game,
especially.
I felt like that got some people talking. You need
Oh
to
yeah,
do well
because
on those
it's in prime
primetime
time.
standalone
Yeah,
games.
yeah, and so he'll have another opportunity next week because he faces Philly in prime time. Philly, I mean, that's going to be a huge divisional game. But confidence-wise, I'm going to go with Hurts just because, especially when you consider the circumstances of this game, the run effect will be a little more important. Hurts obviously provides a lot more in that realm. And overall, if I'm talking about building a team, I think that I'd prefer a quarterback like Hurts, a guy who you can create a system around, and a guy who has the dual threat capability. But I do think that there is an argument to be made when you talk about specifically decision making with the way turnovers have happened this year for Hurts.
I really like that. Um I feel like it's so interesting because I don't think that the Eagles would trade for Brock Purdy. Like I think that the way their team has been constructed, Jalen Hurts is the perfect quarterback for them. But I also think that the 49ers wouldn't want Jalen Hurts. I think that they like both teams have really mastered kind of building a team around their quarterback, which is kind of interesting because the Eagles have obviously had a little bit more time to do that around Hurts than the 49ers have around Brock Purdy. They kind of just, I don't want to say fell into a perfect fit, but um, I do think it's an interesting conversation because I think in order to actually judge them, you kind of have to say, okay, if I was starting from scratch, because both teams, at least how they are right now, I don't think would trade their quarterbacks straight up for the other. Do you? Do you think that Kyle Shanahan would trade Purdy for Hurts right now?
I do, yeah. I think
Oh,
if you had the
really? Okay.
opportunity,
I like
I
this.
think
I
if
like
you had
this.
the opportunity, you'd take Jalen Hurts.
Okay, I like that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
And
I
speaking
think
of that,
Brock is a good. I mean, Brock has been a great fit. I just
yeah,
think that when I think about Kyle and the way that his true, fully unleashed offense could be, I think it's what you want with Jalen Hurts. It's the reason he traded 3 picks for Trey Lance. I think that's what he want. Now, I mean, Brock Purdy has proven himself this year to be a pretty strong
yeah,
quarterback option. But I think, yeah, if you had the opportunity to go straight up, I think you would go with Jalen Hurts.
I love that. That's kind of I like that because I think sometimes people, um, myself included, maybe over exaggerate how smitten Kyle Shanahan is with Brock Purdy. I think he does really like him, but you're right. I don't think he's like completely settled on like this is 100,000% my franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future. I think he's like, hey, this guy is extremely good and works in our system extremely good and is not only maximizing our offense, but allowing us to maximize the talent around him because he's so cheap. When Kyle Shanahan was talking about MVP today, if I can find it, he actually said that Christian McCaffrey should be in the MVP conversation and should be strongly considered as the MVP frontrunner, which I thought was interesting because I think a lot of people debate this when it comes to Brock Purdy versus Christian McCaffrey, especially because the award does lean so heavily quarterback. And I was going to ask you about depending on the winner in this game and which players go off, if this game could be a strong case for, catapulting whether it's Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey or Brock Purdy into maybe leading that front runner MVP conversation. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is already there. So with a win, that could potentially really solidify or exaggerate that enthusiasm for him. But if Brock Purdy completely goes off, and you can tell not only if the 49ers win, but if he's a big factor in them winning, gets multiple touchdowns, is really distributing the ball, scrambling in the face of pressure, even though the Eagles have already kind of said that their goal is to limit that. I think that you can see a lot of people starting up that MVP conversation for him because they do lean so quarterback centric. But I do think that Christian McCaffrey should be involved. And Kyle Shanahan kind of talked about that too. He said that he kind of thinks it's bogus that it is a quarterback award. Do you think that it should be something that is considered if the 49ers win and Christian McCaffrey is able to run all over this team? Do you think that he should be in that MVP conversation? Do you agree with Kyle Shanahan, or do you think that it would be go towards a quarterback and Brock Purdy would have a better chance?
I still think that if you talk about it, Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion, I said it last year. I'm going to say it again this year because I think it's true. I think he's the most valuable player on this team. And again, I'll say this once again. Most important and most valuable to me are two different distinctions because most valuable takes into account it's more of a impact award in terms of statistics, in terms of how you change the outcome of the game. Most important to me would be Trent Williams, but most valuable would be Christian McCaffrey because their impact on the game is in different ways. And so that's the way that I look at it. But I do believe Christian McCaffrey is this team's MVP. I think that he's the reason this offense flows to the level that it does. I thought that last year, and I thought that this year as well. I think he's the number one, he's the number one weapon on this team. And I think Kyle Shanahan has really found a different way to implement his offense with Christian McCaffrey in the fold. I think he's waited for a running back that he can utilize like he's utilized Christian McCaffrey. And obviously, I mean, what better than to get the best dual threat running back in the entire game? And so that's where my stance is. As for MVP talks overall, I think that if any year were to be the year where a non-quarterback could be in the race for MVP, I feel like it could be this year. I just feel that this is the year where when you talk about quarterback play, there are elite level quarterbacks who are still performing very well. But I don't know if there's any true, clear, front runner for the MVP award. I think that it's a mix, and
Oh, bye, Rohan. Okay, I'm gonna wait for him to come back, hopefully, and I'll continue to talk about the MVP conversation. I think that a lot of people feel like it's almost a waste of time to even discuss Rohan's back, to even discuss quarterback. Hi,
apologize. Yeah,
Rohan. What happened? You got so excited.
I
Hotel
got
Wi-Fi.
so excited that I accidentally clicked the trackpad and clicked X on the tab. So that's what I was saying. But essentially what I was kind of continuing forward is when you talk about MVPs in the non-MVP rate or in the MVP race, I think this could be the year where a non-MVP ends up winning the trophy if there were to be a year. Ultimately, I don't believe that's going to be the case. I still don't. I think when you talk about the MVP, for some reason, it's always going to be entrenched with the quarterback position. And so I think that that's going to be important because guys like Mahomes, I mentioned Dak Prescott, even Lamar Jackson, when you talk about the MVP, it's going to be to a player on a winning team. Those are some of the guys who have some of the best records. But Tyreek Hill, I mean, if he breaks 2,000 yards, which and breaks the receiving record, that could be that could be a guy you talk about. McCaffrey, he has 16
McCaffrey's
touchdowns
on.
already. He's been dominant. He's a
If
guy
he gets
who, yeah, go
If
ahead.
he gets to, I think it's 20, is it 28? The last two guys that were not quarterbacks that won MVP had 28 touchdowns, I think it was. Is that right?
Yeah,
Am I wrong?
yeah. I like you're saying, skill position players, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I feel like
I
he
think
could have
it's
a
gonna
good
be.
case for it
It's
for
got to
them.
be something like that.
I think a lot of people think it's impossible after Cooper Cup didn't win it when he got the triple crown, but I think it's important to consider like how well the quarterbacks were like that season. Aaron Rodgers had like an insane, it was like 30 something touchdowns to like 3 interceptions or something. And the runner up was Tom Brady, and he had a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns. I don't think any of the quarterbacks right now that are in the conversation for MVP are doing as well as either of those quarterbacks were doing. And I do think that that gives the skill position players, whether it's Hill or McCaffrey, a little bit of a better odds to do that. Because even though Cooper Cup did really well, he was in competition with maybe better quarterback play that year than there is this year. But
Yeah, no,
it all
I think
depends on
you're,
how they
yeah,
perform in December, I think.
no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just I found it interesting that Kyle Shanahan, when he was talking about MVP, he leaned towards Christian McCaffrey over, like, it wasn't like he was like, oh yeah, and Brock Purdy should be, you know what I mean? Like, he was like giving his case for why Christian McCaffrey should be involved in that competition. Now, when we're talking about who we have confidence in, who do you think has the better coaching advantage? Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers. Obviously, he's the play caller, an offensive genius, some people might say, or Nick Sirianni, who isn't calling the plays, but definitely sets a, incredible tone and has really turned the Eagles into a complete juggernaut. And also is extremely aggressive, which really, really works in the Eagles' favor. Kyle Shanahan really struggles with aggressiveness. Do you think that that's something he might change in this game? And who do you think has the coaching advantage when we're talking about the matchups between the 49ers and the Eagles?
I think that it's an intriguing aspect when you talk about matchups because a lot of people want to gravitate towards one coach or the other, and I don't know if they're like if you can think in that regard because the coaches are two completely different coaches. I'm talking specifically personality. I mean, Kyle Shanahan and Nick Sirianni are both coaches who are beloved by players, but they coach in very different ways. Sirianni is a guy who is extremely, extremely energetic and extremely passionate. They also run a little bit of a different scheme. Sirianni focuses on the RPO action, and that's kind of because he's revolved his system around his quarterback, and that's made that offense a popular offense. And so I do think that both sides have different tendencies. One of the biggest differences in tendencies, although we've seen an uptick from Kyle Shanahan this year, is aggressiveness. Nick Sirianni is not afraid to go for it on fourth down. The Philadelphia
No,
Eagles, when you look at the numbers, the Eagles, they go for it on fourth down a significant amount. And
they
when
get
I'm
it
talking,
too.
yeah, I mean, that's the
There's
important part is because when it goes to short distance situations, they get it. Philadelphia right now is, I believe, oh boy, I'm forgetting the exact number, but I believe they're number two in the NFL in fourth downs converted per game at 1.2, and their efficiency is extremely high. It's 76.5%. That is number one in the NFL by a mile, by at least 10%. Minnesota second. They've been 100% on fourth downs in the last 3 games, which have all come against playoff opponents in Dallas, Kansas City, and Buffalo. They are aggressive. They'll go for it when they need to, but more importantly, they're efficient when they go for it. Like Ashley mentioned, they get it. And so I think that that's something that is important in this one because San Francisco is also going to, well, if it's a close game, you might need to match the aggressiveness that Philadelphia comes out with.
I hope that Kyle Shanahan does. I know that sometimes he can kind of get a little bit not scared, but like content kind of play to not lose. But I think sometimes we've talked about before the 49ers playing down to their opponents. I wonder if it'll be the opposite of this game where Kyle Shanahan will kind of want to match that aggressiveness to give the 49ers the same opportunities. Because by always going for it on fourth downs, the Eagles are constantly giving themselves more chances. Um, Sirianni is a guy who was sleeping on the couch. He was sleeping on the couch during last game. Okay, I
I
brought that
think
up because
not too sure.
I
I
think
think
it
maybe
was
he slept in the stadium. Maybe I don't really know.
maybe, but Kyle Shanahan did too. He talked about especially that Thursday game. He said they had like a day off and then they slept there until Thanksgiving. So I do think what is this? Okay, Kyle Shanahan was too aggressive last year with Josh Johnson. Kind of funny. He did kind of try to be a little bit more aggressive in that Eagles game, but I think we're talking more about play calling and or more about decision making in the game. I definitely don't think he'll make the same mistake to not challenge and not go for it as much as he did previously. And I'll just be interested in how the game plays out because the 49ers and the Eagles play such different games where and they kind of like oppose each other, right? Like the 49ers I think this year are leading in first half efficiency, scoring on their first drive 90% of the time, really getting out into a lead. If the 49ers offensive or not even their 49ers as a team formula for winning is to score offensively and to have their defense hold the opposing offense to a three and out on their first drive. And usually by getting up by 7 to 10 points, that can kind of be a formula for the 49ers to take off and win. And they're kind of able to hold on to that win, even though they slow down usually in that third quarter, where it's almost the opposite. And I wonder if it plays, I'm going to ask you if it plays into the Eagles' hand because the Eagles have shown that they're unlike they're the opposite of the 49ers where they're leading in second half efficiency and scoring coming out of the halftime in the third quarter. And you could kind of see if they were down only by a touchdown or so, them being able to kick it up and really like have a gritty ending where both teams are fighting. I think the 49ers will have to play all four quarters to really pull out the W. What type of game do you think this is going to uh, end up being? Do you think it'll be a game where one team is able to pull out throughout it, or do you think it'll be a back and forth the whole time? How are you expecting this to go since both teams kind of play such different styles of football, even though maybe style isn't the right word because they both play with immense energy and physicality, but they both win very different ways, or at least recently they do.
I think that this game is going to be an intriguing game. And I also, I'm a person who tries to be as realistic as I can with my own thoughts. I'm not going to overpick the 49ers. I'm not going to shortcut it if I believe that they're going to be losing. I picked the Eagles to win last year. I did in the NFC Championship game. Obviously, that game didn't go as we expected, but that was one thing that I did. I've picked the 49ers to lose in a few games this year. Not that many, but maybe twice, I believe I've picked them to lose this year. Um, this game is different. This game is different. I honestly believe the 49ers are going to win this one. And the Eagles are a tough matchup, but when you look at the way this game matters a lot more to the 49ers than it does to the Eagles. What do I
Yeah.
mean by that? San Francisco does not get the one seed. They are going to be eliminated from the one seed, in my eyes, if they don't win this game. There's not a chance the Eagles are going to drop because if San Francisco loses this game, they're going to go
They'd have
from
to win
8 and
out, and the
3
Eagles
to
would have to lose
4.
twice.
Philadelphia is going to go from 10 and 1 to 11 and 1. There's a 3-game gap between them. Philly also needs to lose one extra game because they have the tiebreaker. They're going to have to lose 4 more games in the last 6 games or last 5 games. That's not going to happen.
No.
Now, the 49ers, like I said, if they win this one, they get to within 1 game with the Eagles. And they have the tiebreaker. So if Philly loses one more than the 49ers down the stretch, San Francisco is going to be the one seed in that regard. And one other thing, they have the tiebreaker against the other team that's kind of coming up there in Dallas. They beat
Yeah.
Dallas. They beat the daylights out of Dallas, so they're going to have the tiebreaker over them as well. Now, the reason I also think this game matters more to the 49ers is when you look at the Eagles' schedule. I've mentioned it a couple of times. They faced 3 straight playoff teams. This is a tough game and a tough sledding of games for the 49ers. For the Eagles. They faced Dallas, they faced Kansas City, and they also faced Buffalo in 3 consecutive weeks. There was something similar in all 3 games. They were down. They came back from behind and won in all 3 games. In against Dallas, they were down a touchdown, and against Kansas City and Buffalo, they were down 17-7, I believe, at one point in both of those games. They ended up
Yeah.
winning all. They ended up winning all 3. They're at 10-1. But in this game, I don't know if they're going to be able to come back from behind against the 49ers team with that same formula.
Can I
Additionally,
ask you,
go ahead. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
when considering those other teams, do you think that the 49ers defense is the best defense out of those so far? I know Kansas City does have a really good defense, but yeah, I'm just asking your opinion while we're looking back at the competition that the Eagles have faced.
I think that that's a good point that you bring up, and I would probably go with the 49ers. The reason being, I think their defensive line is going to be the key because the way that you kind of make Jalen Hurts uncomfortable is you got to put pressure on the pocket. I think the 49ers, if you look at it overall, have a better defensive line than the Chiefs, and I think that that's going to be the way that they kind of have to win this one. I do like the 49ers defense a little better, although I do think Kansas City, while they might not look as great on paper, they're a very good defense and they're well coached. So I think that's a good question you asked because when you look at it, you're trying to find out the differences as to how the 49ers can win this game if the other teams weren't able to win despite being ahead. And so I think that's important. You talk about scheduling, right? Eagles, they're coming off three pretty brutal games. One
Yeah, they're
that
going to
went
be
to
much,
overtime
much
last
higher
year, and you're
because
facing a
they were
physical
playing.
49ers team. Yeah,
Because that's another thing too. Not only do they just have a couple of days rest advantage the 49ers do, but also like their game was finished early. Like they were pretty much resting people,
yeah.
able to not play them to the maximum, where the Eagles were in overtime playing their best guys, getting snaps out of them. And I think I saw the same thing. I mean, I was obviously not in overtime, but even in the Kansas City game, they were playing, all the way to the very end. So they've exhausted themselves in every game. Um, and looking at that playoff seeding, they could still lose this game, tell themselves, hey, we beat them in the championship game. We'll probably face them again. We can beat them then. If they beat Dallas, then this game doesn't really matter. Because that's kind of my thought is if the Eagles beat us or beat the 49ers this game, then that Dallas game means nothing. Well, they can have that same mindset about this game. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying I think they're going to be up for it, but I'm just saying I agree with you that I don't think that the weight is the same for the Eagles because they have won before. They can kind of use those excuses and they can say, if we see them again in the playoffs, that we've been able to meet them there before. Now, I
Yeah,
think for pride wise, when we talk about the way that players are talking, I don't think that I don't think any team walks into a game like, oh, this game doesn't matter. But I just think maybe morale wise that it might be more important to the 49ers. And then also not morale wise, but like literally uh when we talk about winning the Super Bowl, I think whoever gets that number 1 seed is going to have a huge advantage. We're talking about injuries, we're talking about rest, Eric Armstead and his foot, the Eagles having Lane Johnson struggling with an injury, whatever NFC team gets that bye week is going to have a huge advantage.
I think that that's important as well. But the one other aspect that I'll mention when I talk about the difference in this matchup between who wants it or between San Francisco and Philadelphia, and you pointed it out, it's that bye week that's most important. Like I said above, the 49ers are 8-3, Philadelphia's 10-1. Philadelphia loses, they drop to 10-2. San Francisco goes to 9-3. There's still one game of a gap. To me, Philly, their most important game isn't San Francisco. Their most important game is the game right after San Francisco because they face the Dallas Cowboys in week 14. Now, the Dallas Cowboys and Eagles, that's a big matchup. Why? Because if Philly loses to San Francisco, they now are at risk of potentially losing the division to Dallas because if Dallas beats them in week 14, Dallas ends up getting the NFC East or they take control because they're currently at 9-3 after beating Seattle. And so there's a lot that goes on. I think for Philadelphia, though, most importantly, I think that game is the one that's more important to Philadelphia. So I'm not going to say that you look ahead and you don't focus on one game at a time. But I think when you look at how brutal the last three games have been, as well as the game after the 49ers, you can understand where there might be slips in the cracks with the 49ers, or sorry, with the Eagles when they face San Francisco.
I completely agree. I want to ask you a couple more things when we're talking about the theme of the show when I've been asking you, okay, which do you have more confidence in, whether it was quarterbacks or coaches? Um, when we think about the 49ers skill position players going against the Eagles secondary, and then we think of AJ Brown and Devontae Smith going against the 49ers corners. Which matchup do you think is going to be more interesting to watch? Maybe I can even ask you before getting into that, because I've just seen this debate online amongst fans. Do you think that Brandon Ayuk is better than Devontae Smith? Because I've seen people kind of argue the opposite, and I'd just be interested in your perspective if you could talk about that a little bit before
I
maybe
think,
getting into the secondary.
yeah, I think when you talk about the debate between the two, you can see that they do similar things for their respective offenses. Um, I'll say this before I give my answer. I think Devontae Smith, when you look at it, has not gotten the opportunity that Brandon Ayuk
Yeah.
has gotten to be a number one receiver specifically in an offense. Ayuk is the number one receiver in San Francisco. Smith has firmly been entrenched as the number two for the majority, if not all, of his career in Philadelphia, behind a guy who commands significant volume in AJ Brown. You talk about AJ Brown, he had 1,500 yards last year, so it's tough, to get opportunities. I think Smith also, when you look at it, he's a guy who plays similarly. He has good route running, great route running, good speed, good contested catch capabilities. I would give Brandon Ayuk the slight edge because we've seen him. I think that when you talk about his capabilities alongside the size that Brandon Ayuk possesses, I think that allows him to be a little more durable. I also think that allows him to work a little better after the catch, which we've seen Brandon Ayuk do, especially when you talk about this season. I know there's a difference a little bit in the way that they're targeted, but Brandon Ayuk has been one of the best, if not the best, deep threats when you consider both statistics and volume this year. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is underrated. I think he is, considerably getting up there in that top 10 receiver conversation if he's not there already. And so I would give Brandon Ayuk the edge there.
Really like that. I like that a lot. That's a good breakdown. I agree that I feel like it's maybe not a fair thing to be able to compare completely yet, because Devontae Smith is playing behind AJ Brown, so you haven't seen him face those same matchups. But I know that that was a little random, but I saw that conversation, and as a 49er fan, I my instinct was to be like, "Oh, Ayuk is definitely better," but I saw some people making their case for Devontae Smith and was like, "Oh, okay, maybe I'm not um, I don't watch every single Philly game, so maybe not as pretty privy to them." So, but when we are talking about AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, let's maybe focus on AJ Brown for a second instead. Do you think that Travarius Ward, will follow him the way that he did DK Metcalf? Steve Wilkes was asked about Ward shadowing DK in the Seahawks game, and apparently having him shadow the number one receiver has been something that Ward actually went to Wilkes and asked about previously, and they just figured that that Seattle matchup was the first time that they wanted to implement that. But do you think going forward in this Eagles game, that'll be something they stick to as well?
I think that that's something you definitely look at, but when you look, I mean, when you consider why the 49ers signed Charvarius Ward, it was to get a cornerback number one, a top level cornerback that could shadow top level cornerback or receivers, because that's what top level cornerbacks do. I think that when you talk about Charvarius Ward, personally, I believe he's the most underrated player on the team. I think that I firmly believe that. I think that his contributions get overlooked because when you talk about a cornerback, they're usually being talked about if they're bad, right? If they're in the spotlight for the wrong reasons, or if they get interceptions. Ward isn't a guy who will necessarily get a ton of interceptions. One, he doesn't get many targets thrown his way in contested catch situations, and two, that's just not usually been his MO overall, even dating back to Kansas City. But he's a guy who, again, he doesn't get targeted that much because he has sticky coverage overall, and so that leads to inaccurate throws, leads to not as many interception opportunities. I wouldn't be surprised if they go with that route. Having Ward tail AJ Brown. AJ Brown is similar size wise to DK Metcalf, but I also think it's a lot more of a difficult matchup, and I do think San Francisco has to worry about other things. I think when you look at DK Metcalf's route tree and the way the 49ers kind of countered that, I think that's something that DK Metcalf's a receiver where if you have a strong cornerback, you're able to kind of cover him one on one. AJ Brown's a receiver with a variety of routes in his arsenal. I think he's also a guy who specializes with that go route with the contested catch, and so you could see one on one opportunities. I wonder though if it will be to the effect that you saw against DK Metcalf. I don't know if it'll be to that level in terms of the amount that you see it.
And you haven't really seen, and maybe this is just against the 49ers that he gets like this, but I feel like AJ Brown is able to kind of stay in the game a little bit more, where DK, you can rattle him and get in his head, and then he starts to maybe not play up to his potential because he can get a little bit mentally out of it.
Mhm.
Do you think that Ambry Thomas will have continue to have a good game? He's came out of nowhere and actually really had success. I think maybe last game might be his best game with that interception where he really like ran the route for the wide receiver when he caught that interception. Um, I was thinking his first game where he was put back in there and did well, I think a lot of people wondered, okay, is this a fluke? Is this because the 49ers had given him opportunities before to come in? But seems, I mean, only a couple games, but it seems like he's really stepped up. Now, obviously, the level of competition is going to be so much better. I'm kind of anticipating that there'll be a couple times that the Eagles win, but do you think that Ambry Thomas will be able to play decently? I'm not saying he's going to completely shut anyone down, but do you think that he'll, be a detriment in this game, or do you think he'll be able to stand on his own?
It's always tough to guess when it comes to cornerbacks how they'll end up playing. I think that, though, when you talk about the circumstances, you talk about severe rain, you talk about the way the 49ers have been playing defensively, you do feel a little more positive with Ambry Thomas and the way that he's played, especially. I think that there is room to be positive in this regard. And so I think that's a good sign. Again, this is a very difficult matchup. Talking about two upper echelon receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Smith has good speed. Even their third guy, Quez Watkins, has good speed. You got good speed guys all across the board. That's something the 49ers can struggle with in the past. But I think it's truly how the 49ers kind of complement each other with the way that their cornerbacks can play. If they can take away those short distance situations, I think that you kind of limit Philadelphia's offense. That helps your pass defense overall, and that helps you get off the field. If you don't, you keep Philadelphia's complete arsenal in their playbook, and you keep that at hand. I think that that's something that San Francisco might have a little bit of a bigger issue facing. So I truly feel like it's kind of more of a team thing. How are the 49ers kind of going to try and combat, overall what Philadelphia does? Based on that, based on what we see, that's kind of how I think Ambry Thomas will play out.
I like that. Now, when switching over and looking at the other side, uh, Brandon Ayuk will probably be going against Darius Slay, and then Debo going against Bradbury, which I think will be interesting because Debo did call James Bradbury trash last year and then didn't back down from that take, didn't necessarily reiterate it, but said, I think he said, I said what I said on the Kay Adams show. And James Bradbury had a few words for him as well, kind of encouraging Debo to make sure that he can back up his previous talk. So I think that that'll be an interesting matchup. Do you see the 49ers skill position players able to kind of win against the Eagles corners a little bit in this game?
49ers skill position players, I think that, like I mentioned earlier, you try and exploit that linebacker matchup. You might see different variations. Debo Samuel out of the backfield potentially in a couple of packages. Christian McCaffrey could see higher volume, in his role. George Kittle could see higher volume in his role. But I also don't think the 49ers are going to change too much. Again, this is a game where something I've talked about the entire year is you want these games where Brock Purdy is tested. Brock Purdy is put into situations where he isn't supposed to be comfortable. You want to see how he responds because that's ultimately what he'll see in the playoffs. That's ultimately what you can essentially judge him off in terms of can he be that guy that leads you to the promised land. And so this is a game that I feel that it can be in that situation. Excuse me, especially if Philadelphia is able to get some pressure on the quarterback and tighten some things up in coverage, which makes those throws a little harder. I think that when you talk about all of those kind of factors in general, I think that's something that will make it harder on Brock Purdy. So to me, I think truly how the 49ers skill position players are going to do is dependent on how the quarterback will play. I think that they'll be fine on their own, but this is a test for Brock Purdy. We'll see how he kind of responds to the test.
I like that a lot. Now, you did see Hassan Reddick come out and make some comments today. I didn't have a huge problem with that. I feel like if I was Hassan Reddick, I might feel a little bit, um, you know, uh, I'd give people the side eye a little bit because the 49ers players liked to talk about the previous matchup as if it was a fluke. And if I was Hassan Reddick, I might be like, "Hey, I did that. I get credit for that. Why are we pretending that that was, something that I wasn't able to do? Taking out the quarterback counts. That was a move that I made." Um, what did you think about the Eagles players kind of talking back this week? Because the 49ers players did not. Do you think, by the way, when it comes to that, do you think that Kyle Shanahan maybe told them not to? Because, I mean, everyone from Trent Williams to, I think, Taper Pepper, the holder, Debo, Ayuk, everyone who's been asked about it. I mean, George Kittle was like, I don't even know why there's so many media people here. It's just another game. Like they were acting like it's just so weird that people are making this game up to be. I think I said earlier, it feels more like a playoff game, and the 49ers are really downplaying that. Uh, and the Eagles are not. So how do you feel about the talk that's been going back and forth?
I think that it kind of tells you, in a way, who wants it more too. I mentioned earlier, the Eagles don't need this game. I will make a hot take at the very end of the show on how this season ends up going but in my opinion, I don't think the Eagles need this game to get the 1 seed. And so when you look at the way that they're treating it more as, a fun game, more of like one of those like rivalry type of games. The 49ers, they might seem locked in because they absolutely need this game. I think if they don't win this game, their 1 seed hopes are crushed. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. I also think that you're definitely going to hear chirping during the game,
Oh
potentially
yeah,
pre-game, and definitely after the game, regardless of the result.
I do too. I think it's going to be such a fun game. We're going to go to the last segment of the show really quick, and we're going to do a little bit of over unders and give our score predictions. So we're going to start off by, I think I agree with you. The most important aspect of this game is going to be Brock Purdy, his health throughout the game, his ability to avoid getting sacked on every down, avoid getting hurt, able to get the ball out. So we're going to start with sacks, and we're going to talk and protecting the football really quickly. I do think it, like we talked about game plan strategies for the 49ers to win. And I just want to say, I read a stat somewhere and it was like, I forget the exact numbers, but penalties are going to be killer for the 49ers in ways that I don't think that they are for the Eagles. The Eagles are really capable of committing. I mean, we saw against the Bills, Jason Kelsey committed 2 false starts and then they still scored and won the game, where the 49ers offensively can look really like a juggernaut, but on the drives where they do have a false start, some sort of penalty, um, some sort of flag, those are usually the drives where they end up not scoring. And this is a team that's been scoring on most of their, majority of their offensive possessions so far. And when they're not, it's because of some sort of penalty. So playing a clean game for that offensive line against this defensive line is going to be something that is going to be huge in this game. And I think that can, when we talk about make it or break it for this game, I think something like that seems maybe a little bit more insignificant. Penalties and protection of the ball for the 49ers, I think is going to be really important. I can see the Eagles turning the ball over, still winning the game. I can see the Eagles committing penalties, still scoring on their drives. And like I think for the 49ers to win, which I do agree with you, I think it's possible that they'll win. Previously, at the start of the year, when I just looked at the game schedule, I had this as a loss in my brain. This week, I've because of the rest, because it means more, all that, I can totally see a pathway to victory for the 49ers. But I do think that they're going to have to play kind of like they did against Dallas. Like I think they're going to have to play their most clean and their best game for all 4 quarters in order to win. And I think it's possible because when they are playing their best, I think they're the best team in the league, way better than the Eagles. I just don't think we've seen them play like their best for all 4 quarters. Usually it's like one half, you know? And to be fair, that's all they've needed in a lot of these games. But this one, they're definitely going to need it all the way. I know that was a side note before going on that, but I just thought about penalties. really quick,
Yeah.
that I thought we
No,
should
I
speak on.
think though, real quick, one point that you made that I think is very important is penalties and the way that they've kind of gone. Everyone knows the 49ers struggled with penalties early in the year. I think that that was true. And I think, I mean, if you still look at statistics overall for the season, 49ers are at the bottom, near the bottom of the list. Probably, I think they're 22nd overall in penalties. Philadelphia, on the other hand, they're top 10. They're at number 6. They give up or they allow 5 penalties a game, and San Francisco is around 6.5. The interesting thing is the trend over the last 3 games. Those are kind of what I look at. The 49ers post, or second half of the season, post bye week,
Yeah,
Philadelphia against tough opponents. What's the difference? San Francisco, they're in the middle of the pack. They're top 15. They average about 5.5 penalties a game. Philadelphia, on the other hand, is bottom. I think it's like bottom 8. They give up 7 penalties a game. So Philadelphia has been penalized a good amount, over the last 3 weeks. San Francisco, not so much compared to their, regular or compared to the norm over the first few weeks. So interested to see how that trend kind of plays out because you are right. Penalties are a huge portion of the game, especially with the way the 49ers play. They serve as drive killers. So we'll see how it goes.
I like that. I like your strategy of looking at the last 3 games versus looking at the season totality because it does change so much. And I do think it is important also to consider the opponent. Um, But we'll go to the over/under game now. I'm sorry for taking that detour. I just when I was thinking about Brock Purdy getting sacked, I started thinking about the O-line, and then I was like thinking about Colton McKivitz going against their guys, and I was like, oh my gosh, no! And I had a little freak out, and I was like, oh, I should mention penalties. But when it comes to Brock Purdy, are we gonna say over or under 0.5 interceptions for Brock Purdy? Just to start it out.
Yeah, I think interceptions. I mean, when you look at it, Purdy had the stretch of interceptions, had one this past week. So he's, I believe, now at 6 on the season. I mean, this past week's one was pretty ugly. Talk about it getting batted, and then it ended up in the hands, obviously, of a defender. But if you look
You know
ahead
what's
at
so
this,
funny? Just to interrupt you
yeah,
really quick.
go ahead.
When the 49ers lose versus when they win, the story of these things are so interesting. I almost forgot that, like, I didn't forget, like, as soon as you mentioned it, I thought of Kyle Shanahan discussed it. I've heard it discussed. I remember it. But, like, when I've been reflecting on this game, I totally forgot that Brock Purdy threw a literal pick six, which is the worst play. But it's just because the 49ers won. If they lost, you know that would be something that people were mentioning all the time. So interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a good, like, that's an important thing. I think that it's intriguing. I think it would have had a lot more a lot more importance had the 49ers not been up 23 or 24-3
Yeah,
at the
because
time of the
it's
six
it
half.
served as like there was like a weird momentum shift for a second in that, like, obviously they were always kind of down, but I think maybe PTSD 49er fan in me or something. There was a momentum shift where you were like, oh no, like they're kind of getting back into it. But unfortunately the Seahawks have Geno Smith, who, although
Yeah,
just did well against the Cowboys, he's never shown any sort of life against the 49ers.
Gino is not a good fit against the 49ers defense. But we'll talk about interceptions. I'm going to go for the under. I don't think Brock throws a pick in this game.
I agree with you, first of all. And I also think that, like I said, I think that that's going to be such a key for the 49ers if they want to win. We'll go over to Jalen Hurts when talking about interceptions, then over under 0.5 interceptions.
Jalen's an interesting case. I already talked about his turnovers. He has 10 interceptions on the year. You look at the way that Jalen's kind of played in the last few games, been able to get his team the win, but he's thrown a few interceptions. I think the 10 is skewed. He's had 3. He had 3 against the Jets. He had 2, I believe, in week 2. I don't remember exactly who they played, or 2 or 3. But Jalen has thrown a pick in each of the last 2 weeks. Brock has thrown one of the last 3 games. And if you look at it, the reason I'm kind of just basing all of these on statistics that I kind of have thought about this past week. Philly doesn't intercept many passes. They intercept half a game. I believe they have 5 on the season, or no, 6 on the season. San Francisco, on the other hand, they're number 1 in intercepting passes. They average nearly 1.5 a game. I'm going to go with over here because I think that Jalen Hurts, there's going to be one pass where you consider it could be in the most inopportune situation ever, a Hail Mary at the end of the half. But I will go with over zero point 0.5 interceptions for Jalen Hurts.
I agree. Okay, we're on the same level right now. Let's go Nick Bosa, over or under 0.5 sacks.
Nick Bosa is an interesting case because the 49ers defense has been, doing their thing. And I think recently, especially, it's really kicked off. I think the D
Yeah.
line has kind of gotten going well recently. Bosa has recorded at least half a sack in each of the last 4 games. You date it back to the last 7, half a sack in 6 of the last 7 games, which is why, despite the matchup, I think that when you look at it, especially with the way Jalen Hurts has kind of taken sacks, he's taken at least 2 in the last 6 games, or I think it's 6 or 7 games. I'm going to go with over. I'm going to go with over. I think Bosa is the one that ends up landing. I don't know if it'll just be on a one-on-one rush. I think the 49ers might have to be a little creative trying to get some things going up. And so that way, I think that you might see some stunts, you might see different things, but Bosa over on the sacks.
Okay, I agree with you too. I mean, it's so incredible the impact that Chase Young has had. I feel so much more confident when discussing the sacks that this defensive line is going to get. I could also, I'm saying over for Nick Bosa, but it could be one of those things. We've seen this happen a lot since the bye week, where one guy is causing pressure, which is kind of giving a different player a sack, which is going to lead me to Javon Hargrave. Do you think that he'll get a sack, over or under 0.5 sacks for Javon Hargrave? He's going against his former
Ooh.
team. I don't know if that means anything to you,
Yeah,
but
no. Javon Hargrave, obviously, he's another guy who I personally think has kicked it up the last 3 games. When you talk about post bye week, 3 sacks total in the last 3 games, pretty good. I, this is tough, right? When you talk about team overall, I think I'm a little more confident in the ones, but in terms of the players itself, probably be guessing. Um, you know what though? I'll go with over. I don't know if Armstead gets a sack him on injury. It's just all speculation, obviously. But I'll go with Hargrave over because I think there will be at least 2 sacks potentially. I'm gonna assume 3 is kind of my number for the 49ers in sacks this week. And so talking 3, well, I'm going with the 2 best pass rushers is the people who are getting them.
I like that. I like that a lot. Now we're going to go, when we're talking about this defense against the Eagles' strengths, do we think that Jalen Hurts is going to get a rushing touchdown? Over under zero point 0.5 rushing touchdowns for Jalen Hurts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that
We're
that's
like, this is
just
not
somehow
even
bound to happen. I mean, Hurts, when
the
you
most
talk about
confident we've
rushing
been all stream.
rushing touchdowns, Hurts, like that's like I think happened in at least 75% of the games this year. I think there's only been maybe 3 games in the entire year where Hurts hasn't had a touchdown. So yeah, 75%. Yeah, I think that this one's bound to happen. The 40, I mean, I think you'll be surprised when you hear my score prediction, but of the touchdowns that I have Philly scoring, Jalen Hurts is definitely running for one.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. And then we're going to go to maybe the 49ers most, the guy that might elicit that same reaction of just kind of the no problem, over under zero point
CMC you're
0.5,
talking about?
0.5 touchdowns for Christian McCaffrey.
If I were to ever make a parlay, that is the only guy or the number one guy I'm putting on the parlay. Maybe these should be the 2 people. I'll fire up a parlay this week. McCaffrey, Hurts, rushing touchdown, or well, anytime touchdowns for McCaffrey, rushing touchdown for Hurts. Definitely doing it. I mean, yeah, I think so.
Perfect. And then we're going to go, because this Eagles offense or defense is, I think it's 29th in passing, allow 29th against the pass. We're going to go, do we think that Brandon Ayuk is going to get the opportunity? We talked about red zone efficiency for the 49ers. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is 40 of 45 ability to catch it when targeted. So do we think that he's going to score a touchdown? Brandon Ayuk, over
Oh, a
under 0.5
touchdown.
touchdowns.
Um, touchdown will.
Or would you
It's
be more
interesting.
likely to give it to Debo in this game? Debo
I
talked a
think
little,
it's I
a
think
lot
it's
of
hard.
crap, might come back it
Just
up.
because I think the way the 49ers are going to play this game, it's going to be touchdowns in the red zone. I don't know how many explosive play touchdowns they get. And the reason that I'm hesitant is because when you talk about touchdowns in the red zone, Brandon Ayuk does not get many opportunities there just because of the way the offense is designed. They obviously, the most opportunities go to McCaffrey. He leads the league in red zone rushes, or red zone touches overall. I think that makes sense. But I will, I'll lean on the under. I usually am pretty optimistic with Ayuk in the way that he's been able to score. I will lean on the under though this past week or this upcoming
I
week.
like I like that. We're gonna go to the other side of the ball. What about AJ Brown? Over under 0.5 touchdowns for AJ Brown. You think he's gonna win against Ward? Do you think he's gonna get maybe a different matchup and be able to exploit that one of these times?
Yeah, I mean Brown's prolific talent, elite scorer. I think with the way that he's been scoring the last few games, I have to go over. Even if I don't think he's going to be that successful, you look at last week. I thought that was a really good game against him. Right, he had 5 catches for 37 yards on 9 targets, but he still had a touchdown. I mean, I think that the touchdown's bound to happen. I think Philly scores twice in this one, touchdowns twice. A little spoiler alert. I think that AJ Brown will get one of those touchdowns.
I love that. Okay, we're gonna go for how many sacks do you think Brock Purdy will end up taking in this game? Over under 2.5? So like
2.5. Okay.
not too high, do you
Um,
think? Do you think that's too
Yeah,
high? I don't think
I think that's a fine
bad
number. I think
offensive
that's pretty
line
fair.
versus really good defensive line. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
No,
that's
I think that's a good number. Yeah, if you look at it. But I think my answer is also pretty definitive. I think I'm going to go with the under. You look at Philadelphia and the way that their defensive line has produced. They get good pressures. The sack rate hasn't been as high. Now, the one thing that could lean you the other way is that Brock Purdy, over the last few weeks, has held onto the ball a little longer.
longer.
But I think
Yeah.
that's also because of good offensive line play. When you look at Philadelphia and their sack rate, I think it's really, really elevated by their Week 9 performance. They had 7 sacks in Week 9, and so I'm not that confident in them getting to the
Who did
quarterback
they play? Who did
overall.
they play?
I don't remember exactly who they played. I just remember that that was their best sack performance of the year. But I'm not as confident in them getting to the quarterback. I think they'll pressure him, and I think they'll look to corral him. I think they'll be. I'll take the under for sacks.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. I'm going to ask you about your score prediction now. You kind of gave us a hint. I think maybe you're predicting a little bit of a lower scoring game than I am, but what is your score prediction for this game? If you
You
had to
said
give it
lower
your best.
scoring. I actually want to hear yours first because I put mine. Mine's on the internet already in a prediction article, so I want to hear what you've got to say.
Okay, I put 31-27 and I put
Hmm.
Eagles winning. But I don't know.
Oh, Eagles winning.
That's
Okay,
I
there we
but
go.
to be
What's the
fair,
reasoning?
to be fair,
I want to hear
to
it.
be
I want to
fair,
hear it. What's the reasoning
to be
for it?
fair, I made this prediction in the beginning of the week, and I have
Hmm.
been I am an easily influenced person. I was one of those people when they were like look up gullible in the dictionary, I was doing it. So I've talked to a lot of 49ers very smart people who have made their case. It's like I'm reading a persuasive essay and I could easily change my score to 27-24 49ers,
Hmm. Okay.
which maybe
Okay.
I want to go to because it's Friday. I'm not committed to what I said on Monday.
No,
You
you're
know what I
not.
mean? I
No,
can change it.
you are absolutely
My
not.
mind. I change my mind every day. I wake up in the
Yeah.
morning. I'm like, I want a peanut butter banana chocolate smoothie, and by the time I'm making it, it's a fruity little acai bowl. All right,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna go.
La-
I'm
Go
gonna go
ahead.
27. Oh, I'm so nervous. If the 49ers lose, I'm gonna be so mad because I've stuck to the Eagles
You've
winning,
stuck to your
but I'm
prediction.
gonna just for
Stick
the
to your
good
gut.
vibe,
What does your gut say?
just for the good vibes of it all, and because I'm excited about this game, and because of all the reasons that we really made a case for why the 49ers at least want this game more. The Eagles
Hmm.
can still win the number 1 seed even if they drop this game. So I'm going to go 27-24 49ers. I don't know how I talked myself out of that in 2 seconds, but I'm glad that I did.
Yeah. I have a lower scoring game, like you predicted. I
Which is
also have a hot
interesting. Can
take,
you explain?
which,
Yeah,
yeah,
explain your score and then explain why lower scoring cuz
yeah.
I feel
And I
like
also
I
don't think, if I'm being honest, I don't think it's going to be that close. I
Oh,
think
I
the
love this.
49ers win 27-17. That was my score prediction. I think that they win by double digits in this one. Philadelphia's been good this year. I pointed out, though, earlier, you've got scheduling issues. I also think Philadelphia's won very intriguingly this year. I don't know if they've had many confident wins against top level opponents. When you look at the way Philadelphia's won, especially in the last three games, they've had to slug it out from behind and win in close matchups against Dallas. They won 28-23, came back from behind, they won against Kansas City. They were down 14, or I think it was 14-7. They came back and won 21-17. And then against Buffalo, I mean, we all watched that game. It was a close knit or tight knit, game, 37-34. You even date it back to prior games. They've played the Commanders twice and have won by one score both times, 38-31, 34-31. You look at the early season games, and I know you don't value them as much anymore, but they won against New England 25-20. They won against Minnesota 34-28. It's been a lot of one-score games for the 49ers. Or sorry, for the Eagles. I think the 49ers, if they get out to a hot start like they did against Seattle, even if they have a few blips in the road, I think they ultimately end up winning this game. And I think it's going to be by double digits. I think the schedule favors them with extra rest again in what should be a physical game. I understand it's on the road. That's why I don't have San Francisco dropping 30 points like I usually anticipate them to. But I think that the 49ers win this game. Now, my hot take is this. With the San Francisco 49ers winning this game, they're one game away from the one seed. But I also said earlier in this episode, I don't think Philly cares. The reason being, I think Philly can lose two more games this season and still get the one seed. I think if they lose against 49ers and if they lose against Dallas, they can still get the one seed. Now, next week's game is even more important. But Philadelphia and Dallas, if they lose to Dallas, they'll have the tiebreaker 1-1. And I think that when you look at the schedules past that, Philadelphia has an extremely easy schedule down the line. It's Seattle, New York Giants, that is, Arizona Cardinals, New York Giants. That's extremely easy. San Francisco, on the other hand, does not
If
have
the
nearly as
if the
easy of a schedule.
49ers won out, if just
I
because
don't
I
think they win out. I honestly don't. I think I'm
Ravens,
going to say it now. I think they're going to lose to the Ravens. I would not be surprised if they even drop one other game, surprisingly. But I would probably predict them to end at what is this? 13-4. I don't even remember. I don't know the exact number. 13-4.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah, 13 and there we are. 13-4 is kind of my or 13-4, 12-5, whatever it may be. That'll be in my end of prediction. I think Philly gets the one seed regardless of what happens in this game, even if they
oh,
lose, even if they lose to Dallas. Because if you look at Dallas's schedule, after they play Philly, you've got Buffalo on the road, you've got Miami on the road, and you've got Detroit. I don't envision Dallas winning all three of those games. I think Philly wins out after week 14, and I think they ultimately get the one seed. So that's my hot take. Philadelphia
I
loses the game
had
by double digits, but they still get the one seed, and the NFC Championship runs through the link once again.
I'm I like the I love I'm gonna love a win. I like your mic drop, first of all. I like that you took it. You're like, I said everything that I had to say. I can check out now. But I agree. I can see it playing out that way, but I do hate that because I have a sneaky suspicion that whatever team wins the gets the first seed is gonna win the NFC championship game. I just think this year the rest is just going to be so important, especially for the 49ers. We saw them. We did see them. I'm predicting potentially they could win out. We did see that. And even if they did do that, at this point, getting, not getting burnt out by the time they get to the Super Bowl is going to be really important. And it feels like potentially that might not be a luxury that the 49ers have, which
I think
kind
that
of
that's
sucks
it.
because they had games they could have won
I,
earlier.
I think that's a good point. And the one other thing I will mention, perhaps some solace after, a little bit of a disappointment with my hot take. The 49ers, if they don't get the one seed, they don't face one of the NFC's top teams until the NFC Championship. If you don't get the one seed, you don't have to face Dallas or Philadelphia. Instead, Dallas and Philadelphia will likely have to face each other in the
Is
divisional
it
round
hot
before
takey?
facing the 49ers.
Is it hot takey? And maybe once again, remember how I changed my mind from Monday to to Friday. So no one's allowed to hold me to this. But is it especially because they're maybe I might be literally talking myself out of it as I'm saying it. Because their defense has performed so poorly, especially recently. Like I like how I remember I complimented you on looking at the last 3 games versus the
Mhm.
season totality. But there's a part of me that thinks that the Lions could secretly be like a little bit harder of a matchup than Dallas.
Oh, you
Maybe.
think? You're thinking in that regard. Detroit.
Exactly.
I think that Detroit
Just
is
because they can have
interesting.
that angst a little bit, but maybe not. Maybe you think about Kyle Shanahan.
Personally, I look at it like this. I think they could be a tougher matchup than Dallas, but the reason that I think this way is not because of Dallas or Detroit. It's that who would I prefer to face Philadelphia? To try who do I think is the best way or best team to knock off Philadelphia? I think Dallas matches up best against Philadelphia. And so the way that I look at it is because them two match up well against each other, that's going to be a more difficult matchup in the divisional round to where the other team, whoever comes out the victor, is going to be, a little more or is going to face the physicality a little more when they come against the 49ers. I think the 49ers are a good match for Detroit because when you look at it, I think the way that they do it is place Jared Goff into unfavorable situations. Personally, when you look at it, I trust Dak Prescott a hell of a lot more than I trust Jared Goff. And so that's kind of the way that I kind of view things. I also think when you look at Detroit's schedule, apart from week 1, I don't think Detroit's beaten a good team. They have beaten Chicago. They've beaten Los Angeles, the Chargers. They've beaten the Raiders. They've beaten the Buccaneers. They've beaten the Panthers. They've beaten the Packers. They've beaten the Falcons. I
Wow,
don't
that
think
makes
any one of
that
those teams
does
are that
take
good.
away any sort of
Whereas
enthusiasm.
Dallas has beaten, they're 8-3. I think the big game is how they play in Week 14. But I think when you talk about it, I don't know if Dallas has necessarily beaten a good team. I haven't looked at it as well, but I think they've been a little more dominant. I think that I fear Dallas a little more. Well, to be honest, I don't fear both teams, but I think Dallas is a better matchup for Philly.
I agree. I'm so excited to watch this game, Rohan, and I had such a good show with you. I kept you on for a half an hour longer than I said I would. I know that you're in Indianapolis and gonna have a really busy day tomorrow, so I so appreciate you coming on and previewing this game with me. I always get kind of lost in these conversations and can keep you over, so I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone in the chat and everyone watching. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm gonna have content coming out tomorrow and then obviously in the game on Sunday. And then please also like and subscribe to Rohan's YouTube channel and follow him on Twitter so you can read his articles. A couple of them we referenced throughout this show. I'm always getting knowledge and kind of stealing his topics as our banners, and then I bring them up and make him basically explain the articles on the shows. So if you want a preview to what we might speak about in the show, it might be smart for you guys to follow him on Twitter, read his articles, and then come and watch us discuss it later on in the week, because that usually ends up happening. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great Friday, a safe weekend, and that you guys have such a fun time watching the game. Anything that you want to say or plug before we go, Rohan?
No, you said it all. Make sure you search up my name on YouTube, on Twitter. That's where you get my content. As always, Ashley, thank you for hosting. Great job today, and we'll be back soon.
Is it bad? We just did such a good job at closing it out, but then I saw this last comment and we didn't discuss it. Really quick, 60 seconds. How do you feel about the refs? My opinion, really quick about the refs, is it equals out. I know that the Josh Allen horse collar thing looked bad. It was in the second quarter. The Eagles literally kicked a 60-yard field goal in the rain. There was plenty of opportunities for the Bills to come back. The 49ers, if they have a close enough game where they leave it up to the refs being able to decide it, then that's on the 49ers. I agree that they were letting Darius Slay kind of do whatever he wants. Hopefully they don't do that. Hopefully with Lane Johnson, maybe Nick Bosa can try to follow him instead of following the ball. And if they're calling Nick Bosa, maybe they'll start calling Lane Johnson. But I just think in this game, much like the penalties, the 49ers can't leave it up to the refs. They need to make sure to be more aggressive and score. And that's what's going to be the key to win, because unfortunately, you're just going to have to deal with the refs. How do you feel?
No, I think you say it. My short, brief answer: I don't care. I don't. I mean, it's football. It's going to matter. Whatever matters is what's on the field. If it's like you said, if it's close enough to where the refs can decide it, the 49ers should have done better.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you guys so much. We're actually